Week number 8. Hello, class. This is your professor, Dr. Brant Ellsworth, introducing our Week 8 assignments and readings. This week in the American Yap, please read chapters 11 and 12. Chapter 11 looks at the Cotton Revolution, the role that cotton plays in both establishing the need for slavery and for increasing the commercial success of the United States in the middle portion of the century. In our primary source readings, you will read the writings of Solomon Northup. Solomon Northup is most famous. His life was just put into a movie. You may have seen it. It's called 12 Years a Slave, based off of his experience as a free African-American man living in New York. He was captured and sent into the South and forced into a life of slavery before he was able to escape and make it safely back north. We will continue to look more at the role of gender and sexuality here in this article by Harriet Jacobs, describing her sexual experiences as a slave living in a white plantation in the South prior to the Civil War. I think this account is both harrowing in its vividness, and it speaks to a large extent about the lack of personal freedoms that many of these slaves had. This is in stark contrast to the religiosity expressed by these individuals, who will read the Bibles and attend churches on Sunday, only to behave in these ways that are seen as both barbaric and savage. Here, looking back at these events, many of us may question how could they justify their actions. Much of it has to do with the way that they classified race. The scientific rationalization at this time was that African were a secondary species to white American. And so justifiably, just like they could treat animals any way that they wanted, African slaves were just a step up from those animals, but not at the same level as their white owners. Chapter 12 will look at the role of manifest destiny, the American push westward. Remember, gold will be discovered in the 1840s. In California, we see the Oregon Trail establishing itself. We have the work of Mormon settlers who will travel into Mexico territory in the 1840s and 50s to establish a community in what is present-day Utah and Salt Lake City. They will expand their community northward and southward, all the way down into Mexico and northward into Canada. Manifest destiny is one of those terms that resonates soundly with many Americans. Right? Living in the East, many Americans at this time believed that it was the country's God-given right, privilege of traveling and owning all of the land westward to the Pacific Ocean. And under that mantle of manifest destiny, that this is God's decision, God's will, we see that Americans were willing to go to many illegal and unethical extents to displace those who were already living here, including the indigenous tribes, the Native Americans pictured here in the left, but as well as dealing underhandedly with our neighbors to the south, Mexico. The United States will force a war with Mexico in the 1850s. We refer to it today as the Mexican-American War. A close study will show that the United States was the instigator in this war. We put our soldiers in contested land and essentially begged the Mexican army to shoot at us. And when we did, we found that justification or to launch an all-out military campaign into Mexico. We marched into Mexico City, and there, essentially with a rifle to the head of the president, gave them their conditions for surrender, which included giving up all of their land, which compromised parts of modern-day California, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, Texas. And so, essentially overnight, the United States had all of that land. Those people who lived there became American citizens overnight. If only English could be learned overnight. So, the United States, we will continue to see a xenophobic or nativist fears. This will be evident in the Chinese merchant complains of racist abuse. Many Chinese, in the aftermath of the discovery of gold, will travel to the United States, A, to seek riches, but B, to escape a massive civil war that had left millions of people dead. And here in the United States, these Chinese immigrants were forced into all sorts of labor conditions. The Chinese were heavily responsible for building the Transcontinental Railroad in the 1860s. And the United States repaid that by passing the Chinese Exclusion Act, which banned all Chinese from immigrating into our country. Chinese was a very broad term. It essentially then was used to classify all Asian peoples because, as Americans would put it in the 1860s, it's hard to distinguish one Asian person from another. The Chinese Exclusion Act would therefore work to exclude the Japanese, Koreans, and people from southeast parts of Asia. This week, your reading assignments, your other assignments include a reading quiz and a primary source analysis, a second and final reminder to continue with your annotations. I do find these helpful. I hope you are finding them helpful as well, as a way of sharing insights with others and being informed by the work of others. Should you have any questions regarding the assignments, shoot me an email. As always, your professor, I am here to help you. It is my goal, my desire to be available and to make this class as rewarding as possible. If there's anything that I can do to make that happen, please let me know. All right, good luck this week in your Week 8 assignments. I will see you next week.